On the top of the engine, on top of the water tank just behind the front seat, is a large hose reel that holds 1-inch hose. You can see we have 1-inch hose on there, but we need more of it. So that's one project I'm continually looking for, is more 1-inch hose that would match this kind of red hose. If you look on the end here, you can see kind of a canvas strapping. That's just to hold the end down. That's not part of the hose or anything like that. Until we find a better way to secure it, the end of the hose, so we just kind of wrap that on there right now just to hold the end of it on. And there should also be a nozzle on the end of the hose. If you look closely, you can see there is no nozzle on there currently. So again, searching for the right kind, period type nozzle for on the end of the 1-inch hose. On the back of the engine, just in the front of the tailboard, just below the hose bed, there's this door that says "How" on it, and the door opens to a little toolbox. And we just keep a few things in there for running gear. But if you look at it closely, the handle on there is actually not correct. It looks like some kind of ordinary cabinet handle. As a matter of fact, there are nuts behind these screws here to give the spacing correct, because the outside here sticks out a little farther than the back here. This is not the correct handle. If you look on behind it, there's a half circle there with a hole in the middle. That's where a round handle should go. I've seen those on other period correct How engines. So that is another project to do, is replace that handle with the correct handle. Also, if you look underneath the door, there's some kind of locking mechanism here. I don't know if this actually moved, went up and down, or plunged type of thing to lock it underneath here somehow. So that's another thing to work on, is to actually figure out how this works, and if I can get it working again, then we could use the other handle. Maybe that turns and pulls the plunger in or something. So I have to figure out how this all is going to work. Something else interesting about the door is that when we got the engine, the letters HOWE were painted white, and I subsequently found out that they should actually be silver, and the outside should be painted silver. So I did paint that frame silver, as well as the HOWE lettering. Actually, upon further investigation of actually seeing a real How built fire engine, the HOWE and the frame, the silver parts, should actually just be the bare aluminum and not painted at all. So eventually in the restoration, I will strip all the paint off. The red will be painted in between the letters and such, but the lettering and the frame around will be just the bare aluminum itself, as it should be when it was brand new in 1938. Behind the driver's seat are two covers. This is wood, and it's covered with aluminum, the same material that's on the running boards. And there are these two covers, one on each side, but they should not be here. This space back behind here we use for storage, some materials, some stuff for the engine and other stuff like that, jumper cables, extension cord, and other things. This space actually should be used for other equipment. If you look at the original photographs, there were some sticks. They look like sticks or poles. Those were actually brooms that they would use to put out grass fires. And I'm not sure what was on the other side by the driver, but if we could get it back to that look. It's nice having a little storage space here. I have to consider this, whether I want to make it look exactly the way it was with the brooms in there, or make a better cover. I'm thinking maybe a metal sheet going across here with a hinge or perhaps, or something like that, to make it fit better with the style of it. These covers, they weren't done very well. I mean, they're kind of like falling apart. So that's a project to work on as well. I think I would want to make this a storage area, but something better than this that we have currently. On the passenger side of the engine, you'll see this long ladder, and it is attached with these brackets here. And there was a ladder there originally, but it wasn't exactly like this one. This is a single ladder, whereas the one that was there, if you look at the photographs, was an extension ladder. It was two pieces that would be extended out to make the ladder longer, twice as long, almost twice as long. But if you look at the original photographs, the ladder was quite large and it extended a few feet beyond the back of the engine. We do have a ladder just like that one. It was donated to the Historical Society and it is vintage to the 1940s. But the problem with it is that if we did put it on the engine and it stuck out a few feet beyond the back, that would be kind of dangerous for folks that are looking at the engine. Now, if you think about it, originally the engine was used for putting out fires and rescues and that sort of thing. So you didn't have people walking around it looking at it like we do. We drive it and we park it, and it's a display piece, if you will. So we get a lot of people walking around the engine. They have little kids that like looking at it. They take photographs. If we had a ladder that stuck out a few feet beyond the back of the engine, you would have a lot of people bumping into it, knocking into it, getting hurt perhaps. They may be looking down at their little kid and they bump their head on the ladder. So we don't want to have that. So what I've been trying to do is look for an extension ladder that would fit. And there's a couple parameters that I need to have this, but an extension ladder that would fit on here that would not extend beyond the back of the engine. So it would have this similar look to the original, but it wouldn't stick out and hurt anybody. The problems I'm having finding an extension ladder, a wood one, it would have to be wood, is that it needs to be 24 inches, or close to 24 inches to fit into this bracket here. Also, if you look at most extension ladders that are wood, that are older ones, the ladder is parallel, and then when it gets near the bottom on the ground, it widens out. Ladders on fire engines don't do that. The two sides are parallel all the way up and down. And that's the problem I've been having trying to find extension ladders, or an extension ladder. Looking at them, they all widen out at the bottom because they're civilian, if you will, extension ladders. They're not made for fire engines. So the search continues. I do have one. It's a little shorter than the 24 inches. I could still put it in here. I think it would still work. I can put it actually next to this one. So we would have both ladders on there, but it would be an extension, and this one as well. Another issue with this ladder that's on our engine currently is that the ends have been painted. This end has been painted green, that end has been painted white. That was not done in the 1930s, it was done decades later, and that was just to identify that this particular ladder belongs to the Greendale Fire Department. You may have multiple fire departments at a fire, and they have different equipment from the different fire departments, and at the end of the day you needed to know whose equipment was whose. So they painted the ends to identify that it belonged to the Greendale Fire Department. But in 1938 it would have just been kind of like the wood color like this. It would have been oiled and then perhaps shellacked. So what I'm going to have to do is take this ladder home, remove this paint, and get it to look like the rest of the ladder here. Then it'll look more original. Another project to consider working on is this rubber part here. Now if you look at the running boards, originally they would have had the metal running board parts, and then just this little section here would have been rubber, I guess as a step perhaps in and out of the cab. But if you see here, the rubber goes all the way down to the bottom of the running board, whereas in the original photographs it only goes about halfway, and then there would be a strip, perhaps aluminum strip, that would define the edge of the rubber. There is no defining strip on the edge of this rubber, and it's kind of loose here as well. So that would be another project to cut that off and perhaps put an aluminum strip there on both sides to finish the rubber part of the running board. Also in this area is this metal part right here underneath the running board. This is the running board up here. You can see the metal kind of continues from there under the rubber part and then over here. And if you look at the original photos, this part should also be painted red. The same as over there, the same color as the rest of the fire engine. So that's another project to work on, is to paint that red. When I do this other part here, see it's red underneath, but then this part should also be red. Another issue with the running boards are the excessive holes. These are not the original running boards. These were rebuilt, I believe would have been in the 1980s when the truck was restored. Particular equipment was put on at that time, and these are holes from that equipment, which was not the correct equipment, which I'm trying to recreate. so it has a lot of extra holes that I'm going to need to fill in a couple ways, perhaps fill them in with some kind of material, or eventually, if we have the truck completely restored, a ground up restoration, repainting and that sort of thing, new running board material, the aluminum cladding on there, would be purchased and replace it, and then just have one set of holes which would show the equipment in the proper position. The tailboard on the back of the engine did not have any extra holes in it, because once it was redone, restored in the 1980s, no equipment was ever put on the tailboard. But to recreate it as it was in 1938, there were 3 pieces of equipment on the tailboard, so those are all fresh holes that I drilled to mount the particular pieces of equipment. Another project to work on is the rubber on the tailboard. Was it there originally? I know it was put on so that the men would have better grip when they're standing on the tailboard on the way to a fire or such. Here it is in 2015, we had the rubber on there. But was it there originally? This original photo from the late 1930s, and it's kind of hard to tell here, but if I zoom in, there you go, you can see no rubber. I see silver there, I don't see the rubber. This photo is actually from the same time period, much better photo. So if we zoom in on the back, we can see, look, it's silver. The same as on the running board, so no rubber was on at that point. When? Well, here, this is an early 1950s photo, and if we zoom in again on the back on the tailboard, it's still silver. There was no rubber at that point. And the next photo here, this is from the mid-1950s. Again, no rubber on there. It's still silver as it was from the beginning. Here you go. This is the first picture we have showing the black on the tailboard from 1966. So I believe that was when it was first put on. And then if we continue through time, this is 1970 when we retired the engine. And if you look in the back there, again, that rubber is still there at that point. And then when it was restored in 1988, you look at the back again, the rubber is still there, or it could have been new rubber at that point during a restoration of the engine. And when we acquired it in 2015, it had the rubber on the tailboard, as it does today. So perhaps I'll remove that and put the aluminum on. That's actually one project I really want to do to preserve it, to make it look exactly the way it was. Here's another truck, 1936 Chevy, built by Howe in Indiana. Again, no rubber on their tailboard. Theirs is a very original truck. And if you zoom in there, you can see it's still the squared kind of aluminum plating. And that's what I would like to do with ours. I peeled a little bit of it back. I don't see the silver there, so I'd have to get some aluminum plating to put it back to original as it was in 1938. Originally, the bumper would have been red. I believe it was chromed by the collector in Michigan. What I would like to do is put it back to red. And I removed the center part bolt here because you can see as it curves here, it gets flat in the center and curves on the end. Originally, it would have curved out a little more, not quite a half circle, but it would have been a nice gentle curve throughout the whole front. So I'm trying to figure out what is it that they changed to make it flat here, unless this bar back here, the support, was bent in an accident or something. I don't know, but there is some, you can't see from there, but there is some damage underneath here. So perhaps it wasn't an accident and it bent this and flattened the bumper. That's another project to work on.